Hi, everybody. Happy to see that you are all with us today. As I already previously said, we have a few new names here, but we also have other people coming back to our webinars, which is really cool. Today's webinar will be presented by Giuseppe De Simone. He's my Swedish colleague, and he will be talking about archetypes, mapping, organization, culture, and leadership. My name is Sofia, and I'm going to be the host today, doing behind the scenes things for you so that you can enjoy the webinar with Giuseppe. Some of you are probably coming back, so you know that there has been a few Organic Agility webinars already. This is now the fourth part of the webinar series, and there are going to be more webinars coming after summer. So we're going to keep also a short vacation break, but we will be back in fall, so stay tuned. A few practicalities today about Zoom before we start. Feel free to use the chat and talk with us during the whole session. Just make sure from the blue box that you speak to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments, because they are very valuable to share. For any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A so that we can monitor all the questions and take them step by step in the end of the presentation. The webinar is also recorded, so there will be a recording sent out to everyone in a post email, and it will also be available on YouTube and online. So just stay in contact with us, and you will also have the recording. Without any further presentation from my side, I wish you a happy webinar, and I'm handing over to Giuseppe.
Okay, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be still here with you, and you know, some of you know me, some of you doesn't know me. I'm Giuseppe De Simone. I'm originally Italian, but I've been living in Sweden for 6-7 years, and I'm a leadership coach. I have a few Scrum Alliance certification. I'm organic agility professional. I will be happy to share with you today an important part of the framework that brings together team and leaders' behavior and organizational culture and design. So without going further, I would like just to ask you and have a grasp about, okay, how many of you have participated to the previous webinar. So I will launch a poll so you can quickly answer. Have you participated to the previous webinar, Leadership in Complex Environments? So I can see, you know, how the audience is composed. Right? Okay, so it looks like the majority of you have not participated to the previous webinar. So this gives me some responsibility also to connect you with the previous content. So I think I'm going to end the poll and share the results a little bit. So you see, like, not everybody has answered, but this is kind of the results. So let's get started with a little bit of connection with the previous subject so everybody can be on the same page. I will stop my video so that you can actually focus on the presentation, yeah, without any distractions. So let me stop my video here. Okay, so what is organic agility? Organic agility is an approach to organizational resilience. It's a meta model that can help organization to increase their level of resilience and adaptability to fast changing market condition. And it works as a scaffolding that holds a new organization to by hand, so to speak, in their journey to create their own practice. So it's not a prescriptive framework, but helps you and your organization to get your own practice that works in your own context. In order to help you that, organic agility is formed by a leadership framework, which will be the focus of today, 5 principles, which we went through, I think 2 webinars ago, and then we're going to go deep dive in the upcoming webinars after summer. And then each principle brings together a set of tools and models that helps an organization in their journey to develop their own practices. So let's focus on the leadership framework, which is like part of the content today. So last webinar we discussed like the foundation. What is the foundation of the organic agile leadership framework? First of all, we said that leadership is a capability. Leadership is not a role that attains to a limited number of individuals, but if we want to if we want to give a kind of high level of autonomy and you know, delegate decision making to all people in the company, ideally, and then the centralized decision making, and then use the capability of the organization in the highest possible level, then this is some capability that should be owned by everyone, because depending on the context, it might be that one person is a leader and another person is a follower, and it's the other way around in another context. At the same time, it's not something that attains all, but it's also not something that a person is born to, but it's a set of skills that can be learned. This is also a very important concept. The second thing is that, you know, there is no right or wrong leadership behaviors, but actually there is just leadership behaviors that are coherent or incoherent with a certain situation or with a certain organizational culture. So basically, leadership in the organic agility framework, it develops actually around 3 dimensions. So, which is the identity of the leader, so the attitude or the behavior of the leader in that specific context, depending on the situation, depending on the culture. So it's all about every time picking what is the most appropriate leadership behavior that fits to that specific context, to that specific situation, and create what we said last time, the less amount of motivational depth for that specific cultural context. So last time we had a look at the 6 leadership behavior that are part of organic agility, and which are like these 6 behaviors: directing, demanding, contacting, envisioning, coaching, and catalyzing. I'm not gonna going deeper into these leadership behaviors because you can go and watch the recording from last webinar. What we're going today, we're trying to connect these leadership behaviors to the organizational culture, the culture of that specific cohort, to you know, like look better at this multi-dimension. So we will add the cultural dimension in this. And how do we do this? We do this through this tool that is called Archetypes. But before we get there, I would like you to, you know, reflect 2 minutes, and I would like each of you in 2 minutes reflect on work-related stories you lived in the past 3-4 weeks. And this can be any kind of story. And I would like you to pick one story that highlights a success, and I say should be work-related stories, and one story that highlights a failure. So it should be one success story and one failure stories. And I would like you to capture this story, the title of this story, on a piece of paper or, you know, in a digital format of your choice, because we're going to use that. So it's not enough, it's not necessary that you share with others, but you can, if you want, using the chat, but it's enough that you record them on a piece of paper. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on this and record them on a piece of paper. One story of success and one story of failure for the last 3-4 weeks. maybe a few seconds more for you to note things down. It shouldn't be, you know, usually this kind of exercises are not too difficult because I'm sure you have dozens and dozens of stories related to your work life. And the reason why I'm asking you to do this is that because we're going to simulate what is the method that we use to do the what we call archetype assessment. I'm going to say more words moving forward. So I see some of you are some of you also sharing in the chat very well. So I think this is good enough. I hope each of you have noted down this story. So let's get into the content of today now. So, and we're going to talk about organizational archetype. So what is an archetype? In the organic agility leadership framework, an archetype is something that brings together the behavior of the leaders, the behaviors of the teams, the needs of a context, and the relationship between the people in the team together with the leaders, and the organizational culture, right? And of course, you know, we have like a different combination of these characteristics can be expressed in these 4 archetypes that you see there. You might ask yourself why these 5 archetypes. These 5 archetypes are coming, as you could read in the abstract of the webinar, from 12 years of experience of Agile for Two with multiple client engagement, like what empirical evidence has said us. So by observing, you know, teams and organization moving towards like growing level of autonomy and resilience, we have seen like these 5 different archetypes, like snapshot in the journey towards autonomy and resilience. Of course, since they are archetypes, they're kind of like theoretical models. And since they're snapshot, they just like have a picture of this journey. But, you know, it's not the only snapshot in a continuum journey. You might have taken another snapshot another time, and you might have seen like a mix of these archetypes. Still, we realize and we found that these are generic enough that majority of organizations, they recognize themselves in these archetypes. And we will see these are very, very useful tool to have a full understanding about the relationship between leaders' behaviors, team behaviors, and culture. So let's try to have a look at each of these archetypes one by one, right? The first archetypes is the expert archetypes. So what are the characteristics of this archetype? So in this archetype, the leader is the technical expert. So the leader is the person who knows more, right? Is the person that assigns tasks to the team. Here with the team, we don't necessarily mean like a team in the pure sense of the word. Maybe we might use cohort as a better, more generic description, because this might be a real team, might be a group work, might be a department, and so on. So we use team and cohort as synonym in this context, right? So the leader is the one that assigned the task, and there is a high level of specialization and the leader level of collaboration. So each person like does their own task and have just a unique relationship with the leader. There's no relationship, not meaningful relationship among the different people. And the leaders has the task also to review and integrate the work. And there is very much focus, you know, the cultural background values control and delivery quality. Not that much, for instance, collaboration. So these people in this team believes a lot in control, in planning, in monitoring, planning, and delivering quality. And if you think about the leadership behaviors, the most appropriate leadership behaviors in this kind of archetypes are the directing and demanding behavior. So these are the 2 leadership behaviors among the 6 that are most appropriate in that specific archetype. So these are the leadership behaviors that are the one that people expect, and that's why they are the ones that are creating the least amount of motivational depth. So let's go to coordination archetypes. So this is kind of like you see, there is an increased level of collaboration. So now, you know, the leaders is not the technical expert, but the leader is more sort of project managers, is the person that ensures that the groups works together. So the leader encourages participation but retains most responsibility. And since, you know, there is like relationships start to be necessary because there is a collaboration here, so it's not about everyone works in a silo anymore, then what happens is that conflict are starting to arise. So for this kind of cohort, in order to acquire higher level of autonomy, this group of people needs to learn how to solve conflicts. And actually, you know, it's an important skill of the leader in this kind of archetype to be a conflict navigator or a conflict solver, right? And the underlying culture is slightly more collaborative, we see, but still, you know, the leader is in the center of the star. And you see, like, the expected leadership behavior, the most effective leadership behaviors in these archetypes are the demanding and the conducting leadership behavior. I said I'm not going to go again into this leadership behavior again, but you can probably look at the recording at last webinar in case you have not really grasped this. So let's move forward now. And we go to the peer archetype. I just want to clarify one point, that again, as for the leadership, there is no right or wrong leadership behaviors. There is no right or wrong or bad or good meaning in any of these archetypes. These are just a snapshot of the reality, and the reality is just the reality. There is no good or right. They are just connected to increased level autonomy and resilience. But we will see, like, you know, that also lower level of autonomy are functioning very well in certain contexts, right? So what happens in the peer archetype? So the leader here is not in the center of the star anymore, but the leader becomes a peer, right? So there is a shared decision making, and there is a higher level of collaboration. So the task of the leader of the group is to provide a shared purpose, but he doesn't need to be involved in all kind of conversational kind of decisions anymore. So the decision making is collaborative, even though the leader might retain some, for instance, veto rights. So he might put a veto on some of the decision. And the underlying culture is primarily collaborative. So this kind of group value collaboration a lot and wants to see, like, the leader like a peer, right? And appreciate the leader be a peer, the leader contributing to achieving the goal of the team. And here, the leadership behaviors that are appropriate here is more like conducting behavior, but also envisioning behavior, right? So the leader must have the skill to provide a shared purpose that is meaningful enough for the team to carry out their task, but the group is able to plan their work by themselves. So let's go to the coach archetypes here. So now you see the leaders change shape and get out of the cohort, so to speak. So the leader here is not a member of the team anymore, but he becomes a coach. So he assumes a coaching role and requires coaching skills. So the operative work here is carried out entirely by the team. And here, in order for the team to really function properly in this archetype, the team needs to learn how to provide constructive feedback to each other. So providing constructive feedback and acquiring a mentality of continuous improvement is super important in this kind of archetype, right? And the underlying culture is fully collaborative. You know, you might recognize in this kind of archetype probably the one of a fully functioning, for instance, Scrum team, and where the Scrum Master plays a coaching role, but it's not necessary. There's an overlapping with that. And what are the leaders' behavior here? The leaders' behavior are more like, again, envisioning, but also coaching, right? And last but not least, we went to the Strategist Archetype. So this is a fully autonomous team where you see, like, now all the people have shift to blue collar. So in a way, everyone is a leader here, and depending on the context, everyone can be a leader or a follower. And and the only you see the connection between the leader and the rest of the the cohort is like dotted line is more blurry. And then that just the role of the leader is to maintain connection with the organization strategy and collect the contribution of the team to the organization strategy. And there is no need to control the team. It's the need just to nudge the teams towards further improving and improving and improving, and fully make a full understanding, have a full understanding of the strategy and understand how they contribute to the overall strategy. And of course, there is a high level of autonomy and resilience, meaning that this kind of group, the Strategist kind of archetype, is also able to work in any of the other archetypes should the context require that kind of approach, right? And the leadership behavior here are more catalyzing and coaching. So this was kind of an overview of these archetypes. So I would like now to launch a new poll, and I would like you now to think again at the stories that you created, and I would like you to think about to this context, to these stories. To which archetype would you connect your story of success? Which of these archetypes does better fit that story? And then in this story, you might be the leader in that context, or you might be, you know, like one of the people in the cohort. And to which archetype you instead would you connect the story of failure? So I launched this poll, and I would like each of you to vote in 2 minutes. What is, you know, to which archetype would you connect your story of success, and to which archetype would you connect the story of failure? I saw now the question from Alok. I'm getting to this question very soon, and if you're not happy, we can get back at the end to the question and answer. So to which archetype would you connect your story of failure or story of success? So giving you a few seconds more to vote. There are still a few people that needs to vote. So, okay, we can stop here because, you know, at least we have, so here are the results, right? So of course you are not a cohort, but this is a simulation about how we do an archetype assessment. So how we know, given a certain cohort, which kind of archetype they feel more comfortable with, and which kind of archetype they don't feel very comfortable with, so that the leaders can get an understanding about which is the most appropriate leadership behaviors that create the least amount of motivational depth in that specific context. So of course, I said this is just a simulation, so it's not so meaningful because you are not a cohort, you are not working together. But if we assume that you are a cohort, what we can see from these results is that, you know, actually looks like you feel more comfortable. Majority of your stories of success are connected to a peer archetype or to a strategist archetype. This is also weird because we have two archetypes that have equal number of votes, and that's probably because you are not like a cohort, but usually we have one of those that are really outstanding. So this is the, for instance, let's assume that it's a peer archetype. So it feels like you feel very comfortable when your leader is feeling like a peer and contribute to the task and so on. And it very much seems that you feel very uncomfortable with an expert archetype, right? So what does it tell you if you are a leader of this group? It tells you that, for instance, I mean, if you are trying to be very much directive and micromanaging the group, they might feel a high level of frustration. That's what happens in many kind of contexts we see, right? Imagine that, you know, like an agile transformation that is starting. What happens is that, you know, organizational managers are creating teams, people that have been working like in a traditional setup for years, like with project managers or technical leads, telling them what to do. And then you create scrum teams, and from one day to another, the manager is saying that, hey, now from now on, you are self-organizing, you are empowering, and you can do whatever you want. And then you see these people like staring at each other, say, what are you saying? I mean, we don't know what to do. I mean, just tell us what we have to do and we're going to do it, right? I'm sure you have seen this. Or on the other way around, you've seen this kind of people that, you know, feel very much comfortable with a peer or even with a strategist archetype. So with very high level of autonomy. And then the leaders is actually asking each and every person what they've been doing, deciding on behalf of the people what they should focus on. And that's on the other side create again high level of motivational depth. And we want to stress about this concept of motivational depth that Lasse explained last time. It's okay if you, it's like with technical depth, right? If you create a technical depth, so if you don't a way like nurture your code, and if you don't nurture your team, and then you have to accumulate this depth that it will take a lot of time to pay back. And then you see why, for instance, people are leaving companies, are leaving teams after they decided to move to Scrum, because they just don't feel comfortable, and their leaders were not able to use the appropriate leadership behaviors to take them step by step, as you will see, towards high level autonomy. Because, you know, these are like the two concepts. On one side, this archetype assessment helps us understand, you know, helps leaders understand what are the most appropriate leadership behavior for that context, but also with an appropriate intervention model, we can understand how we can bring or take that team or that cohort to a high level of autonomy and a high level of resilience. Yeah, and that's what I'm going to explain you now. So this is the intervention model. As you might have seen, adjacent archetypes have some overlapping leadership behaviors, right? So there are like some leadership behaviors that are kind of accepted in two adjacent archetypes, and these are called continuity link. So you can help your team to grow to a higher level of autonomy by keeping the leadership behavior that represents the continuity link, and then by lowering down or trying to avoid to dampening the leadership behavior that is present in the previous archetype, but not in the next archetype, but try to amplify the leadership behaviors that is most appropriate in the archetype with a higher level of autonomy. So from one side, you cannot jump from expert archetype to a strategic archetypes overnight in one step, but you can take your team towards like higher and higher level of autonomy by adjusting your leadership behavior appropriately, which means also that if you want to be able to do that, you must be able to master ideally all the 6 leadership behaviors, because and we have also leadership assessment for that. If you only can master 1 or 2 of the leadership behavior, if you only have 1 or 2 leadership behaviors in your toolbox, you will not be able to take your team towards these steps without creating motivational depth. So in order for a leader to be able to help the team to grow to higher level autonomy, the leader must have all these leadership behaviors in their toolbox. So last reflection is that, as we said, these archetypes are are based on observation, recurring characteristics. So we have experienced that they have a wide range of applicability, but sometimes, you know, they don't apply to some organization, or we consider it is more helpful for organization to extract their own unique set of archetypes that make more sense for that. And that's, you know, there are methods that allow that, and also to visualize. You see, this is an example of an archetype that we created in a company, the approval-seeking man, Boynard, and actually by mapping the leadership behaviors to these archetypes, you can have the same kind of reasoning and understanding and take your team at the same time towards higher level of autonomy. On the other side also, since as we said, organic agility works as a scaffolding, if you have your own company leadership framework with your own company leadership behavior, you can still do a mapping from the leadership behaviors to the archetypes. And then again, even if by using a different leadership model, you can actually use the same assessment, and you can use the same intervention model, which we feel it's a very practical way to increase the level of autonomy of a team. So this is very much embedded in complexity science. So not in the traditional system thinking that, okay, maybe you decide where you want to bring your team, and then you do a gap analysis, and then you do a plan, and then you create this plan, but you need to dance with the system. So every time you need to, it's very much important to understand where you are and to understand what is the next adjacent possible state where you can bring your team by using the natural disposition of the system, because, you know, you cannot impose a big change on your people, but you have to use the natural characteristic of their group and the natural characteristic of their team in order to help them growing a higher level of autonomy, because we all experience that it's not possible to impose a change. I mean, Peter Drucker used to say that you can take a herd of bisons wherever you want, as long as they want to. And we found that this growing step-by-step intervention model is something that can help nudge people into higher level, nudge a group into higher level of autonomy by not forcing any change on people according to their time. So with this, I think I'm done with illustrating the archetypes, the archetype assessment, the intervention model, and the archetype creation tool. So I would like you now to just make a short reflection that you can share in the chat by allowing, by enabling all panelists and attendees. And here are some questions for you to reflect. What do you think are the implications of structuring understanding of leadership, culture, organizational archetypes, right? What are the key takeaways for you? And also I would like you to reflect, how would you see the archetype assessment working in your organization? So please use the chat to share your answer, a couple of minutes, so that we can build a better understanding, not just through my words, but through the collective intelligence here. So what are your takeaways here? Yeah, thanks, Sophia, for resharing everything with all panelists and attendees, so that we can all see the reflection from the And I think it's a good reflection that, all these archetypes needs also to get rooted in the organizational culture. And in the webinar, so the archetype is just, let's say, a manifestation of the organizational culture. And we will see when we do the webinar on principle number 1, you will see further connection between the archetypes and the broader organizational culture context. And then for those of you who also want to deepen, we will share with you some links about education that can help you yeah, Piotr was reflecting that this can be used for stakeholder analysis, which, it is true. I mean, this is something that can be used in any kind of coherent cohort, right? So a group of people that have shared story, shared story to connect to each other. Okay, so yeah, you're welcome to keep sharing. Otherwise, I would like just to go through the remaining slides. I mean, this is like an overview of the upcoming webinars. So we will go very much deeper in the culture, organizational culture. We will show also this tool that is connected principle number 1, which is called organizational scan. So we will go through sense making. So also to add the third dimension in the leadership model, the one about the situation and the context. And we use Canaving for that. And we'll talk about strategy and the value stream discovery and so on. So I will hand over to start my video again and hand over to Fia to help us with the final slides and with the questions.
Thank you. And thank you also, Giuseppe, for the interesting presentation. Here on this slide, you can see that one of the services we actually do as well is the archetype assessment. So whatever you heard today in the webinar, if it makes you interested and you would like to try this out, this is a service that we provide, and we can do it both remotely and when we are allowed to do in-person things again. We are also doing it on the sites. So we will send you the links about the assessment as well in the email, so you can have a look at that. There is also a possibility to do a deep dive with us in more of the organic agility things that already has been mentioned in the previous webinars and also in this webinar. And that you can do by taking the Organic Agility Foundation training together with us. We have upcoming trainings now still in the end of June and in August, and they are remote. So wherever you are in the world, you can join as long as the time zone fits you. Also, if you are interested in reading or hearing more about the organic agility approach, we have the website where you can have a look. There's a book that you can order from Amazon, for example. There's a case study which describes, and of course also the previous webinars that are recorded, so you can listen and learn also from them. And whenever you have questions, of course, the best way is to get in touch with us so we can help you and answer the questions you have. Now would be a very good time to put your questions also in the Q&A. We will have a look at that and start answering some of the questions there. I think we can already start with the first question that we have, and that is, how fine is the line between peer archetype and coordinator archetype? How easy is it to jump from peer to coordinator archetype?
Yeah, I mean, you would like actually to jump from coordinator to peer, and not the other way around. If you want to have an increased level of autonomy and resilience, first of all. And I mean, how easy? It actually depends. I mean, the way to do it, I try to explain, is using this intervention model by using the continuity link, and the continuity link between coordinator and peer is actually the conducting leadership behavior. So using this as a continuity link and try to dampen the demanding and starting the envisioning. So so this is like how you do it. And then the question, how fine is the line? I mean, it actually depends. It's not that you can say that it's going to take you one day to do this transition or one year. It actually depends on the group, and actually depends about how the leader's behaviors is able to create enough stories of success, new stories of success in the new dimension, the peer archetype, so that the team feels comfortable to transition to that. So if you create with new archetype, with your leadership behavior, new stories of success, which that means that people will find comfortable, and then it also will change what they perceive as effective in their way of working together. So when they are in the coordinator archetypes, they feel that having someone who is able to coordinate the plan is more effective. In the peer archetype, they believe that having a more high collaborative, where the leaders actually contribute to the plan, is actually more effective. So everything starts in the ability. Everything starts with leadership. I mean, we always say this as a common sense, but it's actually true. That is a foundation, finds a foundation in the theory. And if you come to the CAL, or if you come to the next webinar on principle number 1, you could actually see how this is actually true by looking at the competing values framework. And we encourage you also to have a look at the Organic Agility book, or the competing values framework book, if you like to learn more. So actually it starts with leadership, and it's true. I hope I answered this question.
I think you had a good answer there. Here is another question. The model assumes that there is a gravitational focal point of everyday leadership behavior. This would happen only in case the group or cohort is rather homogeneous. What if this is not the case, and you have to switch between those behaviors repeatedly depending on the situation and or team member?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I understand the questions. And you can never imagine that the group is really homogeneous, but since like where a team is defined not by the individual but by the relationship among people. Actually, you can get an easy enough understanding about where the group is as a group. It doesn't mean that everybody feels completely at ease or feels completely connected to a specific archetype. So there are always edges, right? So the archetype assessment also helps you to understand who is where and where the edges are and who feels more comfortable. So it's not about yes or no, but it also gives you a map of who is where. So you can also try to incorporate these edges and maybe, try to understand, okay, what is other action that you can do to have less stories that are in a certain archetype and more stories in another archetype. So it's all about this. And actually there will also be like outliers that you have to incorporate. So the example of like my description of the intervention model was actually very much simplified. So there are more nuances by this, but actually how the archetype assessment happens in reality helps you having a complete picture. So it's not about only see the archetype that gets more stories, success or failure, but also try to see the outliers. So it's the picture is every time more important, and this is the role of the leader to understand these nuances and try to incorporate. It's actually very dangerous try to go just with the average, because in a complexity science, you never go with the average. You always make very much value as the outlier. So you have to consider that to adjust your leadership behavior. So we have another question here from Magnus. How can we handle newly composed cross-functional teams whose members come from different archetypes? For example, a DevOps team. Yeah, I would say that you don't do an archetype assessment with a newly started team. I would recommend that the team has been working together for a while, so they have and we say like 3-4 weeks at least, so they have some stories they can all connect each other, because when they share these stories, and actually what we do is that having people write stories and then create a graphic version of the archetypes, and then people mapping the actual stories. So you can also see which story mapped to which archetypes, and then people can relate to each other. And they also have to share with each other the story, so they can also understand, okay, but why you connect this story to that specific archetypes? I mean, I think that in this specific context, we were all more acting like this instead of this. So you can also have create a shared understanding about where they are, because one person could interpret things in a way that does not resonate to others. So it's very important that they have actually shared stories that connect to each other, right? So you do this after they've been working together for a while.
Thank you. If you still have a question you want to ask Giuseppe, now is the great time to do this. Please pop it in the Q&A. Otherwise, I think you gave good also answers to the questions.
So please, Alok, Georgios, and Magnus, I mean, give me signs also in the chat if you feel that your question was answered.
But there is actually one more question, so let's take it now. Is the shift model as well applicable to single individuals instead of groups?
Yeah, I would say this is not intended for individuals, right? This is very much focusing on relationship, and in the end, we know that the behavior from Kurt Lewin, we know that the behavior of a person is actually like mostly depending on the environment. We also see that the behavior of the people, the actual people are actually very much more influenced by their experience, but by their individual nature. I'd also, like Dr. Deming used to say that, if everyone would do their best, 95% of the problem will still be there in any organization. So the system and the relationship about the agency in the system is very much, and the richness of this relationship and the unknowable sometimes of every single details of this relationship is what matters most. So I would say this model is not intended for kind of individual coaching or growth. The individual has an identity that express themselves in their specific context. So we are interested in a work context. So what is the identity of that person? Or what is the expression of the identity of that person in that specific context? What is the expression of the identity of that person? For instance, when this person is at home with kids, we're probably very much different, but we're not interested in that.
Super. Thank you very much. If you also have questions that you don't want to ask now, you can always feel free to contact Giuseppe or me through an email, or you can do it also on LinkedIn, for example. And please also follow Agile42 on LinkedIn so you get the information of the upcoming webinars and more about organic agility. We post a lot of blog posts and other useful things that might be interesting for you. So just go in and click and like us so you get the information we spread out. If there are no more questions, I think it's also fine to close the webinar for now. There is a next webinar coming up on June 30th, and it's going to be at 4:30 set. So please join then. It's going to be my colleague or our colleague Niels who will present then. So we hope to see you there as well. If there is nothing else to add, I would like to thank everybody for being here today from my side. I wish everyone a good summer. Please also stay connected during vacation. If you're on a beach, you can always listen to a good webinar. So we hope to see you during summer, but otherwise in the beginning of fall when you are back.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice time. Thank you very much also on my behalf. Thanks for your engagement, reflections, and questions. So let's keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye.